The scream tore through the twilight like a blade, sharp and desperate, pulling Jacob Tanner from his restless sleep. He bolted upright in his creaking wooden chair, his rifle already in hand, his heart hammering against his ribs. The vast Texas prairie stretched endlessly outside his small cabin, its golden grasses swaying under a blood-red sunset. Another cry, fainter now, echoed from the distance. It wasn't an animal. It was human. A girl, Jacob, a widower of 40 winters, lived alone on the edge of Comanche territory, a place where the line between survival and death was as thin as a spider's thread. He'd come here 5 years ago, fleeing the ghosts of a life shattered by cholera, which had claimed his wife, Eliza, and their infant son. The solitude suited him, or so he thought, until that scream pierced the quiet. He grabbed his lantern and stepped onto the porch, the cold air biting his weathered face. In the fading light, he saw her, a young Comanche girl, no older than 16, staggering across the plain, her dress torn, her bare feet bloody. He didn't hesitate. Jacob ran to her, his boots crunching against the frost-kissed ground. She collapsed into his arms, her dark eyes wild with fear, her breath ragged. "Please," she whispered in broken English, "they come, bad men." Her name, she later told him, was Niue, meaning moonlight in her tongue. She'd fled a rival band who'd attacked her camp, leaving her family scattered or worse. Jacob carried her inside, his mind racing. Sheltering a Comanche girl was dangerous. Settlers in Comanche were locked in a brutal dance of raids and vengeance, but leaving her to die was unthinkable. Inside the cabin, he set her by the fire, wrapping her in a woolen blanket. She shivered, clutching the blanket tightly, her eyes darting to the door. Jacob boiled water, cleaned her wounds, and gave her what little food he had, cornbread and dried venison. She ate cautiously, her gaze softening as she realized he meant no harm. "You good man," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jacob's throat tightened. He hadn't been called good since Eliza's death. He offered a small smile, but his gut churned with unease. The Comanche were fiercely protective. If her people found her here, they might not ask questions before drawing blood. As night fell, Jacob sat by the window, rifle across his lap, listening to the wind howl. Niue slept fitfully by the fire, her soft breathing a stark contrast to the storm brewing in his mind. He knew the risks. Settlers had been massacred for less, and the Comanche didn't always distinguish between kindness and treachery. Yet, as he looked at Niue's fragile form, he saw not a threat but a child, alone and terrified, much like he'd felt when he buried his family. He resolved to protect her, come what may. Dawn broke with a thunderous rumble. Jacob's eyes snapped open. He dozed off, and now the ground trembled under the weight of hooves. He peered through the window, and his blood ran cold. 70 Comanche warriors, their faces painted with streaks of black and red, surrounded his cabin, their horses snorting clouds of steam in the morning chill. At their head was a man with a commanding presence, his eyes sharp as flint, a feathered lance in his hand. Niue stirred, saw the warriors through the window, and gasped. "My father," she whispered. "Sina." Jacob's heart sank. Sina, her father, was no ordinary man. Whispers among settlers spoke of a Comanche war chief, relentless in battle, unyielding in his pursuit of justice for his people. Jacob had no way of knowing if Sina saw him as a savior or a captor. Niue clutched his arm, her voice urgent. "I tell him you save me. You good." But Jacob knew words might not be enough. He'd heard stories of Comanche retribution, cabins burned, families slaughtered. His hands trembled as he set the rifle down, choosing instead to open the door, unarmed, his palms raised. The air was thick with tension as Jacob stepped onto the porch. Sina's eyes locked onto him, unreadable, his warriors' bows drawn, arrows glinting in the sunlight. Niue rushed past Jacob, throwing herself into her father's arms. She spoke rapidly in Comanche, her voice breaking with emotion, pointing to Jacob, then to her bandaged feet. Sina's gaze never left Jacob, but his expression softened slightly as Niue's words sank in. The warriors lowered their bows, but the threat lingered like smoke. The first challenge was communication. Jacob spoke no Comanche, and Sina's English was limited. Niue became their bridge, translating haltingly. She explained how Jacob had saved her from the rival band, tended her wounds, and given her shelter. Sina listened, his face a mask, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt.
Why would a white man help a Comanche girl? Jacob sensed the suspicion. He spoke slowly, his voice steady despite his fear. I lost my family, he said, Niue translating. I couldn't let her die alone. The words hung heavy, and for a moment, Sina's stoic facade cracked, revealing a father's relief, but trust was fragile. The second challenge was the warriors' unrest. Some, young and hot-headed, muttered among themselves, their hands itching for their knives. They saw Jacob's cabin, his rifle, his very existence as a threat to their way of life. Settlers had stolen their land, killed their kin. Why should this man be spared? Sina raised a hand, silencing them, but Jacob knew he was on borrowed time. To prove his intentions, he offered Sina his rifle, a gesture of peace that left him defenseless. The warriors murmured, surprised. Sina took the rifle, examined it, then handed it back. You keep, he said through Niue. For now. The third challenge was deeper, rooted in the chasm between their worlds. Jacob lived on land the Comanche claimed, land soaked in blood from years of conflict. Sina's people had suffered raids, disease, broken treaties. Jacob, though not a soldier, was part of the tide of settlers encroaching on their territory. Yet, as they sat in the cabin, sharing a meager meal of cornbread and coffee, something shifted. Sina spoke of his wife, killed in a raid, and his fear of losing Niue, his only child. Jacob shared his own grief, the weight of Eliza's absence. Pain, it seemed, was a language they both understood. The resolution came slowly, built on small acts of trust. Sina's warriors camped outside, watching but not attacking. Jacob offered what supplies he had: blankets, food, even a horse, to help Niue's band recover from their ordeal. In return, Sina promised safe passage for Jacob to the nearest trading post, a rare gesture in a time of war. Niue, her strength returning, became the heart of their fragile truce, her gratitude a bridge between father and stranger. Days later, as Sina prepared to leave with Niue, he clasped Jacob's hand, a warrior's gesture of respect. You are not my enemy, he said through Niue. The warriors departed, their hoofbeats fading into the prairie's vastness. Jacob stood alone, watching them go, his cabin still standing, his life spared. But more than that, he felt a spark of hope, a belief that even in a world torn by hatred, kindness could carve a path to peace. The story of Jacob and Niue spread among settlers and Comanche alike, a whispered tale of courage and compassion. It didn't end the war, but it planted a seed. For Jacob, it was a reminder that healing begins with a single act, no matter how small. And for those who heard the tale, it was a call to look beyond fear, to see the humanity in the stranger, and to build bridges where walls once stood. Inspiring message: in a world divided by fear and conflict, one act of compassion can change everything. Courage isn't just facing danger, it's choosing to see the humanity in others, even when the world tells you they're your enemy. Let kindness be your legacy, and let it light the way to a better tomorrow.